This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello everyone, welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the Red Dwarf podcast, now on the Film Stories Podcast Network. My name is Kurt North, and joining me for this episode is Mr. Matt Latham and my good old co-host, Mr. Mark Adams. Mark, how the devil are you today?
I'm pretty good. Obviously still enjoying Red Dwarf, being a new fan. Honestly, I was worried it was going to be crap, and none of it is crap. I've probably said that on every episode. But hey, yes, I'm good because Red Dwarf.
Good. Matt, have you sorted all your sound gremlins out, and are we okay to go? What do you think of Series 11?
Who are you?
I'm Captain Bollocks, apparently.
No idea who you are. Sorry.
You know? Okay. And do I need to put you next to masturbation and... Where else could I have Matt? What could we file Matt under?
The one with hair.
Well, that started well.
Matt,
Yes,
how are you?
I am fine, thank you.
What do you think of Series 11?
I don't think it's as good as 10. I'm getting to the point now. I've rewatched it a few times where I'm starting to notice things that niggle at me a bit, and I don't think I'll ever join one of these people who online who are like, oh, it was shit after 6. It goes, oh, it was shit when it went on Dave, or it was shit when they reached the 60s. It's still funny. There have been weaker episodes in earlier series than I think whole of Series 11. I think I'm still enjoying it.
Good.
Now, it's
Good.
interesting that you say that it's losing its sheen a little bit. That is something I'm a little bit worried about because I've only watched these 3 times each, and it's all relatively recently. It's all since about 6 months ago that I've watched it a few times, and I've not lost my sheen yet. How many times have you actually watched it now, you two?
5 or 6.
I've been watching you two for about 40...
Oh, for fuck's sake.
40 odd years. What? Sorry. How long have us two been watching Red Dwarf? Apologise.
Very good. Very good.
Red Dwarf 11, I think I've alluded to it in the past. I think 11 and 12 aren't as good as 10, like Matt said. I know we keep going on about an episode in 12, which we can't talk about now. There is some wonderful moments in 11 and 12. I've not always had a full, like the reaction, Mark, that you've had at the beginning. So I was already at a perspective of, it's not as good, but it's interesting, and there's certain good things in it. And actually, there's certain things that I appreciate more on multiple rewatches than I did. I think it's better than I remember. There are always episodes I'm always going to put on. There are always episodes that I'm quite happy to turn the channel. I think I mentioned Red Dwarf 10 is usually my go-to for modern Dwarf, but there is definitely things in, I know Matt won't have heard the First Contact episode yet, but First Contact was referenced quite heavily, and obviously that's an episode I quite like going back to because it is the Borg, effectively. It is generally good, and I still don't subscribe to the idea that it all goes downhill after 6. Yes, back to Earth, fair enough. I think 10, 11 and 12 are interesting. I also think that 12 is the season where I haven't rewatched as much. Mm-hmm. I think 11's probably more cohesive overall. I think 12 maybe loses its way a bit more than 11 does.
I think doing this podcast, if anything, the series there's 2 series I think haven't aged well. One I don't think isn't as good as I remember. 4 hasn't aged well or isn't as good as I remember. I think 3 and 4 might get some pitchforks aimed at us, but I think Series 4 I often used to remember episodes and they weren't actually in Season 4. So a lot of Series 4 episodes, like I always thought Quarantine and basically any of Series 5 I used to think was Series 4. And then when we went to watch Series 4, I think that's I think degraded a bit in comparison to perhaps 5 and 6. And I think perhaps the sheen, kind of like the aging of 3 is probably... The nostalgia factor of 3's kind of wore off a bit. Okay, you've got body swaps. It's not as good as a memory of it. Whereas I think 10 has aged really well. And I seem to like it every time I rewatch it. There are some bits in 11 that I really like. And I think it's more or less the same in 12. There's clunkers in 12.
I was aware of clunker, but not clunkers.
There's one definite, but I think the quality is slightly drops. It's lower, I think.
So after a much long debacle, we are back. We have gone back in time and removed a kidney from Matt's computer system because
Fucking hell.
it decided to do something really strange. So hopefully the first section sounds all right. Welcome back to Shipwrecked and Comatose. Give and take. Episode 64 overall. You know, we're getting into the lates of the show. Matt, what do you think generally to Give and Take? It was released on the 30th of September on UK TV Play, and then it aired on Dave on the 6th of October. So what do you make to Give and Take, Matt?
I think it's all right. It's okay. It's not classic Dwarf. I think there's one bit which I think is actually really strong and should be up there with memorable moments, but overall it's just above average for the rest of it. There's nothing drastically wrong with it, but there's just been a higher standard of episodes. It's just one of those that gets lost in discussion when people think of other episodes.
Okay, what about you, Mark? And everyone say Matt then. What about you, Mark? What do you think to this episode as a newbie to the new era?
I realised reading through my notes that I've written down, this is really Red Dwarfy 3 times. My observation about this particular episode is that it's really Red Dwarfy, and I'm really happy with that. Matt even said he was disappointed it was only above average, but that's above average, and that's not what I expected because everyone's been so wah about, the Dave series aren't as good. It's a great episode. It's, like Matt says, it's not one of the very, very best, but it's much better than I dared to hope for. So yeah, it's brilliant, and it's funny, and there's a Scudder cameo, so why wouldn't I be happy to see the Scudders back?
One of the big things that I think makes it stand out is that it remembers the cat's a character and not someone who turns up and just goes, wow, and says a funny line and then leaves. The show remembers that we've got a 4th cast member that we could give a story to. It's always been one of the annoyances of the show as a whole for me, that they seem to forget the cat exists. It's one of the few episodes I can think of where the cat has an actual key part in the A plot.
There's some elements to it that's really intriguing. If we start to talk about the episode as a whole, the first thing I wanted to really ask you, Mark, is what you actually thought of the actual Asclepius as a character as the episode progresses. It has some quite interesting themes, and it's quite dark in elements. There's a lot of horror tropes in it, and the whole blood on the wall, going insane, and things like that. It's almost very Doctor Whovian in a lot of ways as well, isn't it?
I like Outside of Red Dwarf in this episode, and it does focus mainly on the Asclepius robot that we only see for a very brief period of time. As much as I love Snacky and how adorable Snacky is, Asclepius is nasty cyberpunk horror evil shittery that I could see myself talking about on a horror podcast. I do have a horror podcast, but it's about dolls, not sci-fi. But it's brilliant. And Asclepius is the stuff of nightmares. He's covered in knives and he cuts out your internal organs. He's fucking ace. I loved that character. I thought it was just nasty horror shit and about as visceral as they could have really got away with on, well, you've got to remember this is still a sitcom.
There's reminding me of other Red Dwarf villains. I think it's Sleepius or whatever he pronounced his name. He's very much like a Red Dwarf one-shot villain in the same lines as I think Langstrom from Series 5. There's quite a bit of like crossover with Quarantine actually with this episode in terms stylistically, I think. That. But yeah, I think it looks-wise, absolutely terrifying, and considering that Red Dwarf, like they keep saying, like they've got no money. If you had that character in Series like 3, the way it looks now, looks like it cost the same amount as the whole of Series 3 cost. So I kind of like appreciate, yeah, and that's probably a sign of the times. But I quite like the visual aspects and the quite terrifying bits. A shame it doesn't actually last a bit longer than it does.
For me, we've mentioned Doctor Who, we mentioned Red Dwarf, we mentioned Chucky. I'm going to mention X-Files in that it's very much like an alien abduction or the episode of The Next Generation where they're being taken into the other dimension. If you remember that episode when they had the kind of the claws and stuff, and they were all clicky things, weren't they? They were going on the Next Generation episode. And that was all about like sort of the alien abduction and organ donor stuff, you know, and taking the organs, and just the fact that this you know, obviously the horror aspect is the fact that this thing's gone insane and stuff like that, and you've got some of the goo and things. So to actually get away with that, you know, on Dave, it's actually quite good. And I get what you're saying with the Langstrom. It makes a lot of sense going back to potentially what I've been talking about all along about, you know, Red Dwarf 11 and 12 is there is quite a few callbacks, whether or not like quietly in the background, but certain ones are more just the way the Red Dwarf is and the way the Red Dwarf is written and things. Others are direct references. I do think there's an element of that, but it works really well.
The difference between Asclepius and Langstrom is Langstrom was a reveal. She was this, hello, I'm a doctor, and now I've got evil laser eyes. The moment you see Asclepius, he is the stuff of nightmares. He is frightening. He's like something out of a Japanese horror film. He is fundamentally scary, whereas Langstrom's scariness was a reveal with the eyes. And let's be honest, they were naff. Whereas Asclepius is just whoa, scary as fuck from the moment you see him on screen. The design is flawless. And I'd also say the design of Snacky is flawless from a very, very different inspiration. So your Asclepius comes from your slasher or horror sci-fi, whereas Snacky is clearly a 50s pulpy sci-fi reference, and they're both perfect. Even if this episode hadn't have been funny, I'd have admired it simply because of the designs of Asclepius and Snacky.
Well, Snacky was what I was going to come on to next, so you've lined up perfectly. The Lost in Space robot is basically Snacky. It's pretty much identical to him.
Isn't there a robot on Forbidden Planet that was also got that design? I can't remember the name.
Probably, yeah.
Robbie the Robot, is it? Yes.
I mean, it was
Robbie
definitely the Lost in Space that I watched as a kid was identical to Snacky, pretty much.
It's slimmer. I think Robbie the Robot's slimmer, but yeah, you got the kind of glass top, the short arms and stuff. But yeah, that's definitely kind of two contrasting robot designs.
Yeah. Danger, Mr. Robertson. Danger. So, Snacky, where does Snacky rate for you, Mark, in, you know, when we've got likes of hot drinks and vendor bar, now we've got Snacky. You wanted more you wanted more like sort of snack machines and stuff. Now you've got Snacky.
I want an episode where Snacky and Vendor Bar get it on, and there's a kind of like a love triangle thing going on with Lister. That would make me howl with laughter. Snacky and Vendor Bar, they're a match made in heaven.
If there are any Vendor Bar and Snacky fanfic writers out there, please let us know, because Mark will probably do a special and interview you.
Send it my way. I'd read that. I'd read the fuck out of that.
That's a challenge for the listenership. Any fan fiction writers, please write a Snacky and Vendor Bar.
So you're telling me that we don't get any more Snacky or Vendor Bar in Series 12?
I'm not saying anything.
Devoed.
I'm not saying anything about season 12 at all. There's a whole thing with him in general, because you've got one of my favorite moments in this episode. I mean, for me, this episode's got full of moments, and I am leaving the one that Matt wants to talk about, because I know he's talked about me about it several times. When Rimmer's having to get his when he's having his therapy session with Snacky, and Snacky's just not. He's just standing there. I just love the fact that he says, "But like I said, they kept saying me, I've got some talcum powder, but I haven't got any talcum powder."
What I really like about that scene is if it was played by a human, they'd be pulling all sorts of faces. But obviously Snacky's not got a face. And so it's just his fucking domey face. And it performs exactly the same function and gag as if it was a human pulling weird faces. And arguably it's funnier because you're imagining this robot going, oh no, inside. And it's as good as a face contorting. It's fucking brilliant.
There is the one moment, there's two moments, isn't there? There's like low on pretzels, which is when he dings, says, that's the end of my time. And the other one is where the whole robot backs off So that gives you that indication, and your mind fills in the gap of like, oh no, Snacky's backing off because he can't do anything. But he is introduced, isn't he, as like a helpful droid, but not competent with anything. But by the end of it, his arc is that, you know, he becomes, I'm a stasis engineer booth operator.
Yeah, I want to bring that up because it's very much the Crichton arc condensed. If Crichton, without Crichton's kind of self-deprecate, like unaware self-deprecation. So, because Crichton's kind of naturally proud of the fact he's evolved and become a member of the crew, but still never forgets his roots. so he'll still enjoy cleaning and gets excited. Starts showing human emotions towards cleaning and enjoying stuff, whereas Snacky seems to be the opposite, where he's gone above his station. Go and get your arm pretzels. I can fix the hyperdrive.
He has got a really interesting development, and even to the point where he's helping the lift shaft get a rimmer. I mean, that's still in the development arc of like, I've had my shaft increase with a nuclear reactor. I've been waiting for this for a long time. You know what I mean? The fact that Snacky's got like a kind of revenge on Rimmer himself, and that includes in Snacky's arc.
And I don't want to criticize my new Red Dwarf, but if I would say something about this series, is some of the endings have been a bit odd or even weak. The Lift's revenge is really, really fun. A great little callback that's actually funny. It's the next episode we're looking at. The ending, you're like, oh, bye then. See you next week.
Yeah.
Whereas this ending is really, really good. It's a callback that I enjoyed.
I think it's something where they seem to, particularly with the Dave era, they've figured out that the AI gives them more ways of exploring character without having to cast people and give the crew more people to interact with. So, like, it's not just Talkie Toaster or Holly. They've got various different kind of spoofs of society. So, like, when you've got, oh, hello, sir. You can picture a New York City kind of hotel porter with a grey moustache who's been there for 50 years going, yes, sir, I'll take you to the 20th floor. And
Which floor, sir? Which floor, sir?
I think also going back to some of the stuff I was saying about 10, there's some nice storyboarding with this episode where the first scene where Rimmer's pretty much in character, like threatening to fire a lift because he's like doing other stuff, but then the callback is that he's following the orders of Rimmer anyway later on there, and I think that's very well kind of very well written and set up.
Yeah,
it gives us some kind of good Rimmer-based comedy later on.
Yeah, which comes my next. I tell you what, it's almost as if we've been podcasting together 3 or 4 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because my next note is to talk about the actual sci-fi concept and the element and the time travel and the stasis booth and the kidney redone and the MTK chip. We've had these sci-fi concepts with the 2 robots. We've now got a time travel thing going on.
I'm going to do something live while we're recording. I'm going to look up if it is possible for a human to survive 2 days without their kidneys. I'm doing this live because I don't know.
Because he's got an MTK chip in, though. He's got an MTK chip in his body.
What's an MTK chip, though? It's a MacGuffin, isn't it?
It's a sci-fi thing, but, you know, it's like a dialysis machine.
Oh, right.
Crichton
Why
explains
do they call it a dialysis machine?
Well, he does. Crichton goes, and you've had an MTK chip keeping your thing, which that's very much like the 22nd century dialysis machine.
I've only seen it 3 times.
It's okay. It's not as bad as your no audience in the studio.
It sounded canned, and I stick by it.
Anyway, you can talk about the whole concept then, Mark.
Was this before Doctor Who used the term wibbly wobbly timey wimey? Remind me when it was broadcast?
2016, wasn't it?
Doctor Who had well done wibbly wobbly timey wimey by that point. So it's wibbly wobbly timey wimey, and that's fine. It's a very British thing.
It is a very British thing. It also has obviously allusions again to like of his appendix out twice.
I think that was a nod.
But yeah, it's the same one. But what were the organs? I mean, if you really want to delve into it, I didn't look into it in this much detail. Whose organs are there on the table then?
Someone else's.
Someone else's.
Some of his stuff's been eaten by the cat, right? Yeah, he's not got much left inside, has he? He's running out of stuff.
Yeah.
Basically, the only original piece is his face and his cock at this point.
That's all you need, Mark.
True. I mean, series 1, he's got a Met Land, and the nanobots gave him a muscle man arm, didn't they? He's got very little left. I think I'm not far off by saying it's his face and his cock.
You're not actually thinking about it.
His face and his cock, an autobiography by Mark Adams.
The only thing I was really worried about as someone from a personal perspective, where they got the cans of leopard lager and the wine from, because if they pour that down the sink, that's a waste.
I would assume that those props are worth something these days.
I'm going to assume at this point that the inventory of Red Dwarf has more empty alcohol
True.
containers than full.
Do you think they just raided the garbage pod?
Yeah,
Okay.
Did
definitely.
they find any Quagars?
I was happy. I'm happy if they've just raided the garbage pod rather than actually emptied any of the drinks that they're going to have. So I'm happy with that.
They seem to have an obsession with time loops and Lister kind of surviving his present and past and future selves because he's his own dad for a start. Then now he's got his own, he kind of donated his own kidneys. Yeah, it's just weird that they just seem to like he cannibalizes himself more or less.
I never thought of Red Dwarf as like a particularly time travel-y television show. You've got your big Red Dwarf and you've really iconic Starbug, and it was the space exploration show. But there's so much time travel. Tika to Ride is time travel. Time Slides is time travel. Out of Time is time travel. Ouroboros is time travel. These are just off the top of my head. And I've named about 10% of the episodes already. It's quite time travel-y. And I've literally only just realised that as we have had this discussion today.
The only thing I would say, and it doesn't work, but it is time traveling out of space, though. We're in the 14th century. We're just in the 14th century in deep space. Still one of the best time travel jokes ever.
It is.
But then I think that's what you probably have to kind of delve into when you realise you can't have aliens.
Good point.
Backwards is time travel.
Future Echoes?
Stasis Leak. Stasis Leak, which is actually the kind of science of Stasis Leak is basically on this. And think about it, because the time travel here.
Yeah, it's a stasis spoof, they re-engineer, yeah.
Yeah, so
we're up to about 20% here. 20% of the episodes, maybe 15 to 20% of the episodes have time travel in. But in my head, it wasn't a time travel show. Fucking hell.
How much does the cat get to do over the course of 12 seasons? It's not as much as you think, is it?
No.
But he does get it this time. He does get a little bit this time. And
in this series, actually. So, yeah, future. Yeah. Like,
and my favourite line in this episode is the cat, and it's, I'm going to tuck you in. Tuck, tucky, tucky, tuck. Which is absolutely brilliant.
And I think this, again, we're talking about the cat here. Last season and this season has done particularly well of reminding you, this is an evolved cat. He's not just one of the gang, does the thing with his hands and makes gags about Rimmer. He's a fucking cat. And he is so catty in this episode. Selfish, selfish, selfish until he needs something. And then he's all over you. Like, I love you. He's so catty. And as someone who has a particularly catty cat, I just love the cat even more for this.
Yeah, there's two distinct versions, isn't there? If we talk about the top section first, where Lister is in the bed and Rimmer and Crichton are giving them the bad news, and obviously the friendly fire, and you've got Rimmer going, put it there, pal of mine. When they say they want the friendly fire, he's the one that shot the kidneys. And then they talk about the MTK chip and the dialysis stuff in that section. Then we get the two versions, don't we? Because the first version, as you say, is showing Kat as someone who's like, I need more sea salt, and doing all that kind of thing, giving him the when he says kidneys, he goes, no, I've got the fish. that kind of, well, it's the other way around, isn't it? Where he says about kidneys, he says, but it's fish.
One track mind?
Yeah, well, kind of like just he's looking out for himself, isn't he? Because he's kind of going, I want that eye drip and give me this, and thank you for the food, it's all mine, and where's the salt? Stuff like that. Whereas, as you say, the flip side is what exactly you were saying, which was I'm going to tuck you in because I need something from you. Which also brings up the other thing about in the first section, when they're talking about the kidney. This is, we take the kidney, what do I get? A hole. Which is just like, it sends me howling every time. It's brilliant. A hole where your kidney was. It's a great couple of scenes, and I like the way they're both mirrored within the episode, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a question. I think this is like Mark territory now. The moral quandary about this, they pretty much con the cat into stealing the kidney.
They do.
You're the kind of moral centre of the podcast. How does that line up?
I don't think Mark has ever been called the centre of anything.
Mid-40s Mark has vaguely got his shit together, but
the one who'll hide the grey morality of this, because they pretty much do steal and basically con the cat into...
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because we live in a society where you no longer have to opt in for organ donation, and that is seen as the progressive moral choice. But it's become clear, and I was only recently speaking to someone about this, that whilst it is opt-in, the moment someone dies, their family can opt them out immediately. So there is now the organ registry again, where you register with organ donation that you don't want your family to do that. And it has basically reset it all, that we all have to opt in again. I've got a little badge in the shape of a heart that says yes on my handbag, because, well, none of my family would stop me from donating my dead man stuff. But in theory, this is what, 2016? We lived in a society where there was a strong campaign to make organ donation opt out rather than opt in. And I wonder if this reflects that particular zeitgeist of the time. The cat hadn't explicitly said that he didn't want to donate his kidneys. So why did they need to ask him in the first place? Although he's not dead. So they did have to ask him. I don't know. It didn't strike me as particularly a moral dilemma. And I guess selfish people can say no to organ donation while they're alive, I guess, is the thing. And they did swizz him out of it.
Yeah, because I'm just trying to think, because this is kind of the sticking point for me in the episode, in that we've often said that despite his laziness and sloth-like attitude, Lister's ability to not really care about himself and his physical well-being, he's always been the basically the moral centre, the conscience of the Red Dwarf crew. He's been the one who would say, no, you can't do that. And if it was Rimmer and the cat, I honestly think Lister would probably say, no, you can't steal someone's organs. I think Lister would morally object to the fact that you can't just steal someone's organ.
Is that the question then, that the cat isn't of that much of an intelligent mind that decision has to be made for himself? Because he is a selfish person. That's the word I was looking for before. I don't know why the hell I couldn't get selfish out. He is a selfish person, but he doesn't actually fully foresee the bigger picture, where Rimmer would make an acute decision based on the knowledge he's got. Cat wouldn't realise it until it's too late. So there's a debate about whether or not has he got the mental intelligence to actually understand what Lister's talking about.
And if he hasn't got the mental capacity to be able to truly understand, he hasn't got the mental capacity to truly consent. It's fascinating, isn't it? Most people would think, you should give your kidney to someone else if they need it and you've got a spare one. Until it's you that has to fucking do it. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people I know that have that kind of attitude. And the statistics of people who are pro-life until their partner gets fucking pregnant, it is a quandary, isn't it? A lot of people can be very high and mighty until it's them. And then suddenly they'll backtrack. And I wonder if Cat is a implicit depiction of that. Because, he's suddenly like, we should all give our kidneys, when he thought it was him. And then when it was flipped, he immediately said, you're not having my kidney. And I think it was more of a satire on people and their selfishness rather than any kind of explicit discussion about consent.
Or it could just be a cat that reflects cat's nature.
Yeah.
As well.
It's not, but does the operation actually take place?
It doesn't happen in the end because it's not. They haven't got Asclepius to make the DNA sequencing. That's why they have to
go back in time.
Go back in time to get the kidney.
Yeah, I just think, considering they see there's a lot of focus on the cat's reaction to it, like there's no real kind of epilogue to him reacting to, hang on, you just tricked me. Yeah,
it's done with, isn't it? Like,
yeah, he kind of misses it, and as much as and again, my general show criticism, they ignore the cat. It comes back into place again. They use the cat and then forget to close off that part of his kind of arc for that episode. That's always kind of annoyed me a bit. It's like, okay, you're about to steal part of the cat, and he just doesn't react to the fact that you tricked him.
Do you think if you had to rewrite it, then that they wouldn't necessarily use that and just maybe drill down on the fact that Lister could die and have more of a waiting for God element to it?
It's an odd one, isn't it? I genuinely don't think they meant to create quite as heavy a moral debate as we are having here. I think it was supposed to be funny, lolcat, role reversal, and maybe that's why they didn't resolve it particularly well. And certainly I've heavily criticised issues of consent in previous stuff in mostly Series 7, let's be honest.
8.
And 8. I didn't spot that here. Maybe it's because the cat's an alien. Maybe it's because I'm obviously very pro organ donation, but I hadn't really thought about the fact that, he's not dead. And it is a hell of a decision to give your kidney to someone. I'd like to think if a member of my family needed a kidney, I would do that. But it's a scary thought to let someone cut you open and take out 50% of your kidneys.
Yeah. I wonder if I've seen anywhere else where somebody conned somebody into giving somebody a kidney.
What have I missed?
Oh, God's sake.
Well, it's only just literally clicked in my head.
What have I missed?
There's a TV show where a character has his kidney stolen by his father.
Played by Terry O'Quinn.
John Locke. Lost.
Oh, fucking Lost. As if I was going to remember that. That was a waste of my time,
It wasn't a waste of your time. It's a perfectly good TV show. The Magic Box, a Lost podcast, available to all good podcast catchers.
I will not be guesting on it.
You won't know. You have been... There's under no uncertain terms. He gets conned into giving him his kidney. He consented. It's exactly the same thing, actually. His dad cons him into giving him his kidney and then basically fucks off and disappears from his life and completely uses him. That's for another show.
One of the things I quite liked about that thread is that you get the gag of Crichton having to lie again. And even though he's pretty much been duplicitous since the speed section, they kind of bring back his stuttering when he tries to lie. I have it completely under control. I could work for FIFA, which is probably one of my...
dated reference. Well, not a dated reference, but it is like at the time it was...
It's one of the very few gags that is time-stamped that is universally true.
Yeah.
That's a much better football gag than something about Kevin Keegan.
Well, as I said to you boys, behind the scenes, Peter Beardsley was in my local working men's club a few weeks back.
Yeah.
I love that.
And he's yet to be shot.
He's still alive and he's still going well. Is Peter Beardsley. He's doing all right, is the lad. That was a lot deeper than I thought we were going to get. One thing I do say with Crichton as well is that when he does do that lying thing, I love his reaction when he's really pleased with himself that it actually does work. And because he kind of does this little double take where it's like, then walks off after him, which is great. I think that was a great moment. The other thing in the scene as well is Lister when you can tell he's about to break. There's a couple of times where you can feel him breaking, but then there's the other bit where he's saying, "I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I'm just going to come right out and say it." I'm just going to come right out and say it.
Yeah.
because I've held off for a little bit, let's talk about the very beginning of this episode and the fact that Rimmer has been deleted from Crichton's files. Both Matt and I were walking around Birmingham talking about this particular episode, and Matt was like, I can't wait till we get to Captain Bollocks.
It's a fucking great series of gags, isn't it? It's a really good series. Like, so quick, so fast. All of them hit. Funny as fuck, and Captain Bollocks. Just brilliant.
I think it's the best gag in 11. It's the best gag in the series, I think. And I think it should be up there with the moose and the bulb. It's up there for me in terms of gags. The first time I watched it, I had to pause. It's very rare that I had to pause Red Dwarf because I'm laughing too much. I had to pause because of the Captain Bollocks stuff. He goes, oh my God, sir, Captain Bollocks.
And it's so Crichton, the way he just over-eggs it and makes it worse. It's just, again, goes back to me saying how just so Red Dwarfy everything is. All the characters are pinpoint the exact image of how I see my characters. The cat is really catty. Rimmer is really petty but sympathetic. Lister is a lovable slob, and Crichton is not very good at being a human, but really tries to be a human. Everything is just so on point. And this scene also gives us the word toss pottery, which I quite like. I don't know whether it could be said that this is the only potential quotable dwarf of Series 11, but I've always, not influenced by this because I hadn't watched it, but I've always used bellendery in the same way as they use toss pottery in this context. And I can see that this might be something that people would go, I'll have that. And, accuse people of toss pottery, bellendery, and other such aries that aren't real words. And I love that.
Well, two words that are real is when he gets the files reinstalled, and you can be right alongside ringworm and rimshot. That conjures up so many things. It's brilliant. I love it. I love it. Talking about Rimmer, we're going to talk about this next week, but season 11 up until this point, until we get to Officer Rimmer, there is this thing about him wanting to be shown as, I am leading commander, or blah, 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 in charge of, etc., etc. And he does it again here in this episode where he talks about, like, I am the main guy of the ship, and, we'll speak about that in a bit more detail. And I know, like Matt mentioned about Mark being somehow the moral centre of the podcast. And Matt, you are our go-to Arnold J. Rimmer expert. So I'm going to go to you on this one, in that, there has been, since the end of 10, there has been this fresh look at Rimmer because he's had his drain, he's had this, etc., etc. He is now a scumbaggery, and I think they kind of mention it a little bit here, that he's not of the same class, and class will come into it next week, which is going to be really interesting. But there is this idea that Rimmer is still trying to be that holier-than-thou person, higher-stated person, and it's mentioned in this episode as well.
There's a behind-the-scenes trivia bit here, in that this was actually the first episode to be filmed of Series 11. I don't know whether it might have potentially have been initially the opener. When you get to the scene where he talks to Snacky and talks about the fact that he says, oh, my father is not my father. If you think of it in the mindset that this was the series opener, it pretty much follows on from the revelations at the beginning. I think it's a natural progression. He's had this revelation that he could actually be someone. So the standards he should look up to aren't as high as you should be. I think he's still kind of got that Rimmer-esque attitude, but he's processing it. And I quite like the continuity of him accepting that and going, okay, I've got this mindset, but I'm still me. One of the slight annoyances I sometimes get with the character arc of Rimmer, that they seem to kind of keep backtracking on his hero development. This is like the third time he's had that hero moment, but at least they're seemingly addressing it with the psychiatry aspect.
I think the psychiatry scene is fascinating because I didn't clock any of that and now completely agree with what you have said about it. What I took from that was it was a social commentary on how people see and hear what they want to hear in certain situations and are so blinkered that they don't spot what's so obviously in front of them. He solves his own problems because he believed that a psychiatrist was what he needed to solve his problems. And he got what he thought was a psychiatrist and did it himself. I thought that was a social commentary rather than what you're saying. And maybe it's both, but it's much more nuanced.
I think Rimmer, somehow finding that he has the emotional maturity to discover that about himself, has a feedback loop of he's full of self-loathing about the stuff he hasn't achieved. From what he believes his strengths are, he overthinks what his strengths are. So his strengths aren't as good as what he thinks they are. So when he kind of thinks, oh, okay, I've just solved this myself. You're a genius, snack machine. It's probably been overconfident in that his issues have solved themselves. So he's like, okay, I can move on now, when he probably hasn't fully processed it himself.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going back to Snacky as well, the fact that Snacky, Rimmer was like saying he's acting officer is the word I was looking for. I found it in my notes just then. I'm acting first officer of the manager Red Dwarf, that kind of thing, where he wants to be that person. He wants to be that person exactly, but he's not got the right tool set for it. Yet Snacky has got the right tool set for it, but he's not confident enough or appreciative enough of the things he can do, and it's actually pushed up the ladder to go, you can do this because you're really good at what you think you're not good at, and it's the opposite of what Rimmer's doing. So I think there's a bit of dichotomy going on there as well.
It's actually much more sophisticated than the continuous series of gags that it is, because it is an incredibly funny scene, but you can just look at it like that. It's funny. Rimmer is an idiot, and he's trusting a snack machine to be a psychiatrist, and everything he says is funny. There's so much nuance to the scene as well. And that level of nuance is tough to do and still be funny.
I think one of the key things that he says, he goes, I've recently learned that my father is not my father. However, my mother is still my mother. He goes, okay, he's shifting his neuroses now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, because a lot of his stuff is to do with his father and his brothers. So now I think it's like, so he's probably thinking, okay, we've solved that, but we still have the issues with his mom that we can kind of fall back on or retcon if we need to go and give him something to loathe about. Rimmer might have had this epiphany, but he's still got that kind of upbringing that's made him into the kind of upstanding citizen that he is.
That's all I've pretty much got, really. But there's one final thing. We mentioned about the cleverness of like the time traveling aspect of it. And I do think that the way they bring it back with repeating the scene in like that time loop aspect, where you've got, him coming round the corner with the lift, and then we seeing the other side of the conversation. I thought that worked really well. And just then the delivery of it and the audience seeing that and going, kind of thing. They don't exactly do that, but they kind of laugh, and you can feel that there's that realization that this is what it is now. I thought that was really good. But that is pretty much all the notes that I've got. So have either of you got anything else you want to bring up? Any notable like quotes, anything like that at all, or anything you want to bring up?
Just a couple of little ones, to be honest with you. The special effects, I want to just mention how impressed I was by them. The CGI of the spaceship that exploded, fucking great. And then the green screen work with Lister being chloroformed was also sublime. Lister chloroformed himself. Previous episodes, that would have been Crichton or the cat, or they just clearly had a way to do it that looked good. And they were like, yes, let's get it done. And it looked really, really good. The only other thing I really wanted to talk about was, in fact, it's just pointing out something sarcastic, really. The thing that both Colin and I clocked from this episode on the opening credits was using Crichton as a brace, but it wasn't just that. He used him as a brace and also as a shield. But surely chemical darts wouldn't affect a hologram.
This is Rimmer.
Yeah, I guess.
Theoretically, I think Rimmer could probably run at something, and depending on how strong the hard light is, probably just run through a wall or something if he's fast enough. Yeah, this is Rimmer talking about, so he's most likely going to be using the shield, even though technically he's probably the best shield against physical weapons that the crew has.
I've actually got two things just that came to mind when you were talking about that particular scene. There's that weird row, row, row your boat thing that he's singing, which isn't row, row, row your boat. It's something slightly different. And the music at that point, it's got this kind of with like a delay on it. And it's really interesting.
If you say so.
It's a really interesting musical section. But yeah, it's got this really staccato-y delay kind of beat to it. So I found that was really interesting. It's something that I think I picked out on Series 7 where they put something in there. It felt very 90s. This was quite modern, and it was okay, but it still doesn't feel quite Red Dwarfy, in my opinion. But I still quite enjoyed it, to be fair. But it was an interesting musical piece in that section. So those are the only two bits that I've got. And Ronald Littlewood was mentioned by Snacky, but I wasn't sure if I haven't had time to research that. I had a quick search, but I don't know if that is a reference to something or someone or a crew member or something in the past. I don't think it is something in the past. So those are the only things that I got.
Yeah, I picked up on that, but I completely forgot about it. Where it says, you used to be friends with or served with a fella, I think, called
Ronald Littlewood.
Yeah,
I'll be honest, that isn't something I picked up on either. So I guess we can get told off by people on Twitter. Tell us what we've missed. None of us, we all spotted it, but none of us
did anything about it.
Yeah. Only a couple of things from me from the tongue-tied Wikipedia entry. They've made there's a background information bullet point where it says apparently when Starbug escapes from the exploding ship, you see a shot of Red Dwarf. Apparently that's the only complete CGI rendering in Series 11 of Red Dwarf because the models hadn't been finished. So, so it's a full CGI shot of Red Dwarf in that shot rather than actual model work, which suggests I think that other episodes have at least either all or partial models instead of CGI for the ship.
And it's a revelation, really, the level of special effects that they have in 10, 11, and I'm assuming 12, compared to, come on, it was ropey as fuck in Back to Earth. And it took me out of it. The tentacles were just terrible. They should have had rubber tentacles over the CG ones. And that was my biggest fear. And it is the exact opposite of what my biggest fear was.
There's an interesting comment in the reception section of the Wikipedia as well, where it says that Digital Spy claim that Give and Take rivals the best of Doctor Who and is the best Red Dwarf episode since Gunmen of the Apocalypse.
I did see that. It is not the best since Gunmen of the Apocalypse by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
Oh, it's great, but I don't agree that it's that, no.
No, Trojan exists.
Trojan exists, exactly.
Yeah.
I'm just about to say that. Trojan exists. Lemons is better than this. I wouldn't say Dear Dave probably is about akin to it. Tika to Ride is a great episode. So Duck Soup's a great episode. So no, I don't agree with that at all. Right, so if that's everything, we shall move on to next week, where we'll be talking about Officer Rimmer. And surprise, surprise, on this section that we've got Matt doing this episode and next episode. I wonder why he chose these blocks, Mark. I wonder why he chose these blocks.
I have no idea. It is always Matt. This is a little bit of a peek behind the scenes. It's always Matt that books way ahead of the other two for the episodes that he wants on the spreadsheets.
It's mainly because I've seen them.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And the other thing as well is, well, I've lost my trail of thought now, is that if I was to do the thing I was going to do at the very beginning and then follow the Rimmer mode, then I would have a very difficult thing to do next week. Because there's quite a lot of Rimmers next week.
Your idea for all the versions of Rimmer?
There's quite
we're not doing that episode after tomorrow's.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love to do a full episode on the Barbershop Quartet, but that's for next week.
Yeah.
So until next week, Mark, where can people find you?
Just at Mark Adams HC on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter, I talk about lots of things. And Instagram, it's just for my ceremony stuff. I'm a celebrant.
Excellent. And Matt, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can just find me on Pick a Disc or Ask Us About Loom. 2 different podcasts about 2 different things. I'm not going to go. If I start talking about them, I'll be forever. So, yeah, look for them.
And now I've just realised by the end of this episode that what I should have said at the very beginning was I've accidentally deleted Matt and Mark from my programming, and they sit alongside masturbation. So it's Mark Adams, Matt, and masturbation all sit in the same folder. There you go.
Sake.
You can find me on Linktree, linktr.ee/rmuldrake. It's RMULDRAKE, where you can find all my stuff that I'm doing currently, whether that be about Star Trek, about kidney issues in a TV show called Lost, then you may find that's there as well. So until next time, while Mark barfs up on the video that I've just seen him do,
Captain Bollocks!
Tucky, 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 tucky.
Shipwrecked and Comatose is a podcast brought to you by the Film Stories Podcast Network.
The show was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North.
The logo was designed by Carl Bryan, and the theme tune was composed and performed by me, Colin Jackson Brown.
I suppose I'm here as well. Matt Latham.
Follow us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod and follow the network on Twitter at Film Stories.
Ma.